A man is found inside a car with a gunshot wound in Rexdale. We'll have a live update from the scene in just moments.
And the deadline's approaching for a potential shutdown of Canada's largest airline. And the Prime Minister says that the government will not intervene.
And another protest at TIFF over a documentary about the war in Ukraine, despite the screening being canceled. This
is Live at 5. Good evening. I'm Bakari Savage.
And I'm Lena Latifat. Thank you for joining us. Police say a man was shot inside a vehicle in Rexdale. It happened this afternoon.
Let's go live to CP24's Beatrice Vaisman, who just arrived at the scene. This is at Islington and Bergamot in Rexdale. Beatrice.
Bakari, according to what paramedics tell CP24, this person was found inside a vehicle. He's been taken to hospital with serious but non-life-threatening injuries. So that's the good news in this story that is otherwise incredibly startling for a lot of people because of the fact that it happened in broad daylight, 3:40 in the afternoon, in a main thoroughfare on Islington, just near Bergamot, just really outside of the Rexdale Mall. 3:38 is when police tell us they got the call for gunshots here in this area. The back window of this gray Hyundai sedan shows evidence of gunfire. 3 bullet holes in the back driver's side window of this vehicle. 1 bullet hole as well in the metal just above the back window as well. So at least 4 gunshots here that happened in this shooting, Lena and Bakari. We don't know exactly where in the vehicle this man was, but he was found by first responders in the car. He was tended to. I spoke to one gentleman who you'll hear from next half hour. He talks about actually seeing first responders arriving. He watched as the shooting victim was loaded in the back of an ambulance. He says that he was conscious, that he could see him talking to first responders as well. So it sounds like, thankfully, this person will survive, Lena and Bakari. There is a road closure in place here, of course, a big police presence, forensic investigators just arriving here on the scene a few minutes ago as well to begin documenting and cataloging all of the evidence here. Police have not actually put out any information about the person or people that they believe are responsible for this. No suspect description at this point, but certainly the officers and the detectives here in this area will be canvassing for any witnesses along with video surveillance footage as well. Back to you.
All right, Beatrice Vaisman reporting live from Rexdale tonight. Thank you, Beatrice. The investigation continues into a shooting in North York last night that sent an 18-year-old to hospital.
And police were called to the Jane and Chalk Farm Drive area. This was around 11:15. They found the victim with serious injuries. More than 30 shots were fired in what police tell CP24 was an exchange of gunfire.
It's really horrible, like a house for many people, like old people, sick or children. It was really bad to happen in a home. Many people living to get this incident. So it was horrible. That's what I can describe.
Because of what happened. You don't know what's going to take place after. You don't know what's going to take place after. So you have to be scared for your life and your grandkids and them life. That's what you have to be scared for. You can't be scared about nothing else.
I was doing delivery in a driftwood area, 306 driftwood. At that time, I was doing the delivery. I was going through the tunnel. And on the left-hand side, there were 3 guys sitting with the knife. And I was running when I looked into that left-hand side. So they were looking at me like I was too much scared at that time. I didn't even throw the package. I didn't even deliver the package. I ran away back to my car, and I was not even stopping at that time. I was just running towards my car because it was parked too far.
And a police source confirms to CP24 that a gun was recovered at the scene. Investigators say a light-colored vehicle was seen leaving the area, but no suspect description has been given.
Well, a brazen lunch hour shooting led to Oakwood Collegiate been placed on lockdown for several hours today. Chopper 24 was over the scene today as police talked to potential witnesses on Rosemount Avenue. Officers responded to the school on St. Clair West around 11 o'clock this morning for reports of a fight that included gunfire.
When we arrived, we learned that there were shots that had been fired out of a vehicle, and the vehicle had subsequently fled westbound on Rosemount Avenue. There were many young people that were in the area during this time. as a result of the school in close proximity being on lunch hour. However, we're very happy to report there are absolutely no injuries.
Police say they're looking for a dark-colored sedan last seen driving westbound on Rosemount.
Well, Jacob Hogard has been denied bail as he seeks to appeal his sexual assault conviction to the Supreme Court.
Justice Jill Copeland made the decision after hearing arguments at a bail hearing for Hogard earlier this week. The former Headley frontman began serving his 5-year prison sentence a few weeks ago. Hogard has filed an application for Canada's top court to hear his appeal on grounds the trial judge made an error in allowing certain expert evidence. The Supreme Court has yet to respond.
Well, the deadline looms for Air Canada and the Union Force pilots to reach a deal, or else a strike or lockout could begin next week. And flights could be canceled starting Sunday.
Yeah, we're giving you a live shot from Pearson Airport. Let's bring in CP24's Melissa Duggan, who's there for us, and she's been following the latest on how talks are going and how passengers are preparing.
Alina, if Air Canada and Air Canada Rouge flights are grounded, that would affect some 110,000 people a day. Just to give you an idea of the pressure that's on negotiations right now between Air Canada and the union that represents more than 5,000 Air Canada pilots. The situation for travelers at the moment, maybe they have changed their flight plans already. Air Canada has been waiving some fees, offering different alternatives to travelers as we look ahead to Sunday, because that's when the airline could issue a lockout notice, the union could issue a strike notice, and that is when we could see service being suspended. So that is starting Sunday. But as for now, travelers kind of uncertain about what they're going to be doing over the next little bit. Let's say they fly out of here. Will they be able to get home? Here's what one woman is telling me about her family's travel plans.
My daughter's meeting us in Greece on Tuesday, and because we have no idea if they're going to strike or not, we had to book her another ticket through Air Transat, and I had to pay a premium because if I have to cancel it, so that I don't get charged an extra cancellation fee. So we now have 2 sets of tickets for my daughter to go to Greece, perhaps. We don't know.
So that's just an example of one family's headache during this time of uncertainty as we wait to find out if negotiations that are still ongoing between Air Canada and the pilots union are successful or not. Now, if there is some sort of work stoppage, it could be some time until regular service is resumed. Here's why. We're hearing from an Air Canada spokesperson giving us this explanation.
There is no such thing as a short disruption. If we start winding down the operations, there will be inconveniences for days. So again, that's why we are trying very hard to avoid that. That's why we are negotiating as hard as we can, and that's why we are thinking the government should help if it comes to that. But again, for these days, we'll continue working very hard to find solutions for our customers, but it's going to be a major disruption.
All right, so how are talks going? We do know that wages, that's the big sticking point. The union representing pilots pushing for more money. They're saying inflation has been an issue, and also they want to kind of narrow the gap between Air Canada pilots and their American counterparts who received a pretty lucrative deal the last time they signed a contract. Again, talks are still ongoing, and we are seeing some changes already, Lena and Bakari. That is because Air Canada not putting perishable foods, not putting live animals on planes, just because we don't know what's going to happen over the next little while. But as for air travel for humans like us, it's still on track. Any disruptions we might be seeing right now, Air Canada saying that has nothing to do with this labor rift at this time. Back to you.
All right, CP24's Melissa Duggan live at Pearson. Thanks, Melissa. Well, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says that his government will not step in if there's a work stoppage involving Air Canada.
So I'm not going to put my thumb on the scale on either side. It is up to Air Canada and the pilots union to do the work, to figure out how to make sure that they are not hurting millions of Canadians who rely on air travel, thousands and thousands of businesses across this country who will be hurt if they can't get the work done at the bargaining table. So I know every time there's a strike, people say, oh, you'll get the government to come in and fix it. We're not going to do that. We believe in collective bargaining, and we're going to keep pushing people to do it.
And the president and CEO of Destination Toronto, Andrew Weir, says potential job action at Air Canada, that's a major concern for the travel and tourism industry.
Toronto's very fortunate to be such a global hub, particularly through Air Canada, and it's one of our competitive advantages. But, you know, especially on the meetings and convention side where you've got customs issues, you've got that border issue to overcome. And many meeting planners see the opportunity to come here. They see the opportunity to have maybe their first meeting outside the U.S. here. But when you start introducing more doubt, more worry, more concern, more reasons to maybe we should just leave it in the U.S., it's easier. That's a real concern. And so anytime you have one of these reputational setbacks, it has a lingering effect. Even once it gets resolved, that reputational effect can linger for some time afterwards.
The Canadian Federation of Independent Business is warning that a work stoppage at Air Canada could have a devastating impact on small businesses as well as the Canadian economy. A statement from the group reads in part, quote, nearly 120,000 travelers depend on Air Canada to reach their destination every day. Canada's hospitality and tourism sectors would lose out on the end of the critical summer season if Air Canada starts winding down flights on Sunday. A work stoppage would also cause delays in transporting critical cargo across the country. A single day of interrupted service would cause weeks of disruptions and inflict major damage to small firms who depend on Air Canada service to connect their goods, customers, and employees.
It is 5:11, 24 degrees. This is Live at 5.
And coming up, another protest over a documentary about Russian soldiers. It was supposed to be screened at TIFF today.
Welcome back. The Toronto International Film Festival has pulled a documentary about the war in Ukraine, but a protest over the film still went ahead outside a downtown theater today.
CP24's Kayla Williams joins us live with the latest on the controversy. Kayla.
Yeah, that's right, Lena and Bakari. So the premiere was scheduled to take place this afternoon at 2:30 at Scotiabank Theatre in downtown Toronto. But as you noted, at the last minute yesterday, TIFF organizers making the announcement that they would be pausing this screening indefinitely. Now, this, of course, comes as there have been a number of demonstrations as well as people in the community, the Ukrainian community to be exact, as well as Ukrainian officials who have called this film Russian propaganda. Now, we're talking about the film Russians at War. It's a first-person documentary that was done by a Russian-Canadian filmmaker by the name of Anastasia Trovomora. Now, it spurred the protest in recent days. And again, as we noted, TIFF did pull the screening today, but it did not stop a few dozen protesters and demonstrators from coming outside of the theater just with flags in hand, as you could see here, to make it known that they do not support this film. Here's more from what we heard on the streets of the demonstration earlier today.
The idea that she spent 7 months in Ukrainian occupied territory without knowledge or without permission from the Russian government with Russian soldiers is laughable. We've seen journalists, Ukrainian journalists and international journalists jailed in Russia for speaking out against the war. So the idea that she spent so much time there as an independent journalist is just ludicrous.
We're very upset that they don't seem to understand that this is Russian propaganda. This filmmaker, worked for RT, which is the government-funded Russian information agency. It's not listed in her TIFF bio, and it's unbelievable to us that this documentary could have been made in the circumstances the filmmaker says, which is, given that Russia arrests all journalists that come in, foreign and domestic, to say that you can be embedded with a Russian military unit for 7 months and be filming freely is pretty unbelievable.
So the director, as I noted, Tromomova, she filmed a Russian battalion of soldiers and medics on the front lines of Russia's invasion of Ukraine for over 7 months without Moscow's permission. Now, it did put her at risk of criminal prosecution. And earlier today, we spoke with two of the producers of Russians at War, Cornelia Principe and Sally Blake. And here's what they had to say in regards to the premise that some are calling this film Russian propaganda.
This is not a film that the Russian authorities would want people to see. So to call it Russian propaganda is ludicrous in that context, right? They wouldn't want Russians to see this film because it doesn't, first of all, it doesn't make the army look good, but it also counters this idea that Russian army is, well-trained, out there as heroes, and that they never die. And that's the opposite of what we found.
So, Lena and Bakari, although there were some people that were looking forward to the premiere of this film, Russians at War, here at TIFF, we did get word today that just down the street in Windsor for the upcoming Windsor International Film Festival, they will be going ahead with the release of Russians at War. And in fact, the film is also up for a $25,000 WIFF Prize in Canadian Film nomination. Back to you.
Okay, CP24's Kayla Williams live in studio. Thank you. Well, former Raptor DeMar DeRozan has released a new memoir, and in it, he talks about mental health.
Yeah, in the book titled Above the Noise, DeRozan writes about growing up in poverty in California, losing friends to gang violence, and his struggles with depression. He's been really vocal about that. The 35-year-old was traded in a blockbuster deal in 2018, which sent him to the San Antonio Spurs for Kawhi Leonard.
Just vulnerability, that it's okay to express that. Having a topic about it could bring so much, enjoyment and kind of break the stigma of holding so much in. It's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay to be vulnerable in the sense of you may be wrong about a lot of things, but talking about it is kind of a therapeutic way to work towards the right direction to kind of, get yourself in a better place.
DeRozan was selected 9th overall by the Raptors in 2009 and then spent 9 seasons with the franchise.
Right now it's 5:18, 24 degrees. This is Live at 5.
Coming up, the criminal trial for the 2 main organizers of the Freedom Convoy protest has finally wrapped up. We'll tell you more. Welcome back. Ottawa is donating up to 200,000 Mpox vaccine doses to African countries grappling with the infection's rapid spread.
The doses will come from Canada's existing supply and will not affect the country's preparedness for domestic cases. Millions of doses are believed to be needed to control the outbreak across several countries in Africa. Last month, Global Affairs Canada vowed to provide $1 million to help fight Mpox shortly after it was labeled a global emergency by the World Health Organization.
Well, the case of a man arrested in Canada accused of plotting a terror attack in the U.S. has been put over until December. 20-year-old Mohammed Shahzaib Khan, a Pakistani national living in Ontario, was not in court for today's hearing. His lawyers said they're waiting for extradition documents from the U.S. and for authorization from Canadian officials before proceeding. Khan was arrested last week in Quebec, allegedly trying to cross into the U.S., where officials claim he was planning to attack a Brooklyn Jewish center. And the Prime Minister was asked today about this case. He says this arrest highlights how effective Canada's security services and institutions are.
We work with partners around the world as a Five Eyes country, sharing intelligence, and there's many situations in which Canadian intelligence has been important to partners around the world, but all of us are confronting similar threats of violent extremism and radicalism that requires us to be vigilant. We are constantly making sure that our security services and intelligence agencies are keeping Canadians safe, whether it's through vetting people wanting to come to Canada or ensuring that people here are not threatening to cause harm to other Canadians.
Khan's charged with one count of attempting to provide material support and resources to a terrorist organization.
Well, the criminal trial for the 2 main organizers of the Freedom Convoy protest has finally wrapped up.
Tamara Leach and Chris Barber, they are accused of mischief, intimidation, and counseling others to break the law. The convoy protest took over Ottawa's downtown in early 2022. The Crown has argued that the 2 conspired to essentially hold Ottawa residents hostage to pressure the government to change its pandemic policies. The defense has argued they exercised their fundamental right to assembly and expression as part of a legal protest. The court said today it needed time to render its decision.
Well, the driver charged with killing Johnny Goudreau and his brother Matthew appeared in court today.
In regard to Mr. Higgins' release, it says, I believe the state has convinced this court by clear and convincing evidence that there is no amount of monetary bail, non-monetary conditions, or combinations thereof that I could put in place which would ensure the statutory goals. For those reasons, I am going to grant the state's motion to detain Mr. Higgins pending the further outcome of this case.
Well, 43-year-old Sean Higgins was denied bail by a New Jersey judge due to a history of alleged road rage and aggressive driving. Prosecutors say that Higgins had a blood alcohol level of 0.87%, 0.007. That's over the legal limit. Well, Goudreau and his brother Matthew, they were killed last month while cycling.
And Justin Timberlake has pleaded guilty to impaired driving from his arrest in New York back in June.
To everyone watching and listening, even if you've had one drink, don't get behind the wheel of a car. There's so many alternatives. Call a friend. Take an Uber. There's many travel apps. Still, take a taxi. This is a mistake that I made, but I'm hoping that whoever's watching and listening right now can learn from this mistake. I know that I certainly have.
Timberlake spoke outside the courthouse. This is in the Hamptons after giving his plea. The judge sentenced him to a $500 fine with a $260 surcharge, 25 hours of community service at a nonprofit of his choosing, and required him to make a public safety announcement.
It is 5:24, 24 degrees. This is Live at 5.
And up ahead, motorcyclists, motorcycle enthusiasts, they visit Port Dover for Friday the 13th.
Welcome back. Motorcycle enthusiasts descended on Port Dover today for a Friday the 13th tradition.
Perfect weather helped draw a big crowd to the Lake Erie town for the event, which it dates back to 1981. The OPP said upwards of 100,000 motorcycle enthusiasts were expected. It gives a big boost to local businesses.
At this point, it's a well-oiled machine. We bring together, EMS, OPP, fire, bylaw, the health unit, and then our local board of trade and service groups, and we plan for an on-season event or an off-season event. So road closures, washrooms, garbage cans, extra safety certainly is given a big amount of consideration, and then we just dive in based on the weather and the months.
And this is the first Friday the 13th of the year. The only other one, that's in a couple months in December.
Right now it's 5:28, 24 degrees. This is Live at 5.
A man is found inside a car with a gunshot wound in Rexdale. We're going to get a live update from the scene in moments. Stay with us.
A man's found inside a car with a gunshot wound in Rexdale. We're going to have a live update from the scene in moments.
The deadline is approaching for a potential shutdown of Canada's largest airline, and the Prime Minister says the government will not intervene. We're going to tell you more about that.
Another protest at TIFF over a documentary about the war in Ukraine, despite the screening being canceled.
You're watching Live at 5. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Lena Latafat.
And I'm Bakari Savage. Police say that a man was shot inside of a vehicle in Rexdale. It happened this afternoon.
Let's go live to CP24's Beatrice Faisman, who's at the scene near Islington and Bergamot. This is in Rexdale. This is a very active scene, Beatrice.
It is an active scene, Lena, and it happened in the middle of the afternoon. 3:38 is when police got the call for this shooting. It happened in the northbound lanes of Islington. We're showing you the vehicle in question that you mentioned, the vehicle in which the victim was found. It's this gray Hyundai sedan. Forensic investigators right now taking pictures of it. You can't see it from our vantage point, but we'll show it to you in some video in a minute. There's 4 bullet holes on the passenger window on the driver's side. And so clearly this was something that saw the gunshots either going across Islington from the southbound lanes to the northbound lanes, or possibly from another vehicle or person who was traveling in the same direction as this vehicle. But I talked to a witness who tells me he watched as first responders tended to the shooting victim. By the way, he was taken to hospital with serious but non-life-threatening injuries. Here's more from that witness.
I saw everything. I saw firefighters, ambulances. I saw the guy getting back on the stretcher, actually. And yeah.
When he was transported?
Yeah, he was transported. He looked stable. He didn't look too bad. He was stable. He was conscious. I saw him being transported back to the ambulance, and after that, they just blocked off the entire intersection. Investigation, I assume.
And it happened just steps away from the Rexdale Mall, Lena and Bakari. So keep in mind, Islington, an incredibly busy main thoroughfare at 3:40 in the afternoon, would have had lots of vehicles traveling both north and south, lots of pedestrians walking around. There's not only the mall across the street, there's a gas station across the street, a church on the other side, and lots of businesses in the area as well. And so lots of people have been walking around kind of taking a look at what has happened, and most of them are just aghast at the fact that there was this gun violence breaking out in the middle of the afternoon. Here's what one woman said to me when I asked her how she feels about this rash of gun violence.
When I'm coming, I thought it was accident. I never know it was shooting. Yeah. But they really need to. The violence is too much. It's too much for the city. It's too much. The young youth, they're just dying. And it's just the same people. They're the same race killing each other, and it's not right.
And I want to correct something I said that it happened in the northbound lanes of Islington. It's actually the southbound lanes, Lena and Bakari, just at Rexdale Boulevard, between Rexdale and Bergamot. So certainly this is something that's troubling for anyone who lives or works or travels, commutes through this area. Again, we know that thankfully it sounds like the shooting victim is going to survive. He was taken to hospital by paramedics with serious but non-life-threatening injuries. At this point, police have not put out any suspect information. They simply said the victim was found inside the vehicle. They haven't said how many others, if any, were inside the car as well. But again, the bullets in the window, on the back window. So there was obviously, it would have been someone driving the car as well, Lena and Bakari. And so now police are trying to piece together exactly what happened. Lots of video surveillance in the footage as well, in the area as well. And that footage will obviously help police in their investigation as well. Back to you.
Okay, live in Rexdale, CP24's Beatrice Vaisman. Thank you. And the investigation continues into a shooting in North York last night. This sent an 18-year-old to hospital.
Police were called to the Jane and Chalk Farm Drive area around 11:15. They found the victim with serious injuries. More than 30 shots were fired in what police tell CP24 was an exchange of gunfire.
This morning I said if suppose somebody was coming out in the elevator, they can't too, because they're not going to take control of them more than they're firing. They said they're firing shot. They would have died too.
It's really horrible. Like a house for many people, like old people, sick or children. It was really bad to happen in a home. Many people living to get this incident. So it was horrible. That's what I can describe.
I don't know when my day will be wrong. Like at that day, anything can happen, right? I'm a family guy, I have a small kid. I'm too much scared right now after seeing all these things. I don't know whether I can come tomorrow or not. I'll share this thing with my wife, but there is no other choice I can do. Like, the government has to do something with that.
A police source confirms to CP24 that a gun was recovered at the scene. Investigators say a light-colored vehicle was seen leaving the area, but no suspect description has been given.
And no injuries reported after a brazen lunch hour shooting led to a lockdown at Oakwood Collegiate. Police responded to the scene around 11 o'clock this morning on Rosemount Avenue, south of St. Clair. Police say there was some sort of fight or altercation that led to shots being fired from a vehicle. Fortunately, nobody was injured. The school was in lockdown for the rest of the afternoon before students were let out around the 3 o'clock bell.
Speak to your kids, make sure that they're aware of general safety in the area, be aware of their surroundings as well. I'm sure that the school will be offering some counseling as well as having student supports in the area. I know that we will be doing a SafeTO notification, and then we will have the city deploying some resources to the vicinity here, looking at both counseling as well as supports for the various people in the area.
And police say they're looking for a dark-colored sedan last seen driving westbound on Rosemount.
Well, Jacob Hogart has been denied bail as he seeks to appeal his sexual assault conviction to the Supreme Court.
Justice Jill Copeland made the decision after hearing arguments at a bail hearing for Hogart earlier this week. The former Headley frontman began serving his 5-year prison sentence a few weeks ago. Hogarth has filed an application for Canada's top court to hear his appeal on grounds that the trial judge made an error in allowing certain expert evidence. The Supreme Court has yet to respond.
It's 5:37, 24 degrees. You're watching Live at 5.
As Air Canada services, they're starting to be impacted today ahead of a potential labor disruption at the country's largest airline. We're going to have an update on negotiations next. The deadline looms for Air Canada and the union for its pilots to reach a deal, or else a strike or lockout could begin next week.
Yeah, and flights could be canceled starting Sunday. The impact could be enormous. Let's go live to CP24's Melissa Duggan. She's been at Pearson Airport, keeping a really close eye on how talks are going and how passengers are preparing. Melissa.
Yeah, Lena, I've been in touch with Air Canada and the union that represents more than 5,000 Air Canada pilots, asking them throughout the day, how are negotiations going? They're telling me they are still at the table. They are still working to hammer out a deal ahead of Sunday, because that is when we could see things start to change. That's when the company could issue a lockout notice, or the union could issue its strike notice. And that's when we could see airline service beginning to be suspended, and that could affect a lot of people. We're talking about 110,000 people could be affected a day, because of course Air Canada, along with Air Canada Rouge, we're talking about our country's biggest airline. Now, in terms of the impact on travelers, I've certainly been talking to people here who are catching flights today and kind of looking ahead to how they're going to get home a little later on. Here's what they're telling me.
I guess we're just not looking to book with them in the next couple months. Like, I'm flying in a month, and I was not looking to be with Air Canada, I guess, but I don't know. I guess it'll be busier maybe as well if the next couple flights.
We're going to have to decide if they have to go back earlier for school. Are we going to split the family up, or are we going to book with another airline? So it's a waiting game, wait and see.
The best case scenario is a deal. So again, we are very committed. We are trying to reach a deal in whatever time is remaining in the next 2 days. What we're saying is, if that fails, because it takes two parties to reach a deal, right? If that fails, the government should be present to avoid that major disruption. I mean, we are talking about over 110,000 people a day who have plans and who will be severely inconvenienced if we get to that.
So Sunday is a day we're looking ahead to right now while those talks are underway. Air Canada calling this an evolving situation right now. They're already taking some kind of precautionary steps ahead of that potential labor disruption. Perishables and live animals, they're not being boarded onto planes right now. Also, some routes are being changed up. It's not affecting travelers at this time, but the idea is that planes will be in the right place for maintenance, that kind of thing, as we look into the uncertainty that is ahead. And Lena Bakari, I also want to mention, while we do know that talks are still ongoing, and it's not clear yet if any kind of headway, any progress is being made. We just know that they're still negotiating. Back to you.
All right, Melissa Duggan, live at Pearson tonight. Melissa, thanks so much. Yesterday, we heard from Air Canada pushing for the Prime Minister to force binding arbitration. Well, we're hearing from Justin Trudeau today. He says his government will not step in if there is a work stoppage involving Air Canada. Here's more on that.
We need to make sure the parties are working extremely hard to resolve this. The Minister of Labour, Stephen McKinnon, met with both parties yesterday. Is continuing to put pressure on them by highlighting the millions of Canadians and the thousands upon thousands of businesses that rely on Air Canada every single day for their success. So we're going to continue to put all the pressure we can on the parties to resolve things where they need to at the bargaining table as quickly as possible.
President and CEO of Destination Toronto, Andrew Weir, says that potential job action at Air Canada, that's a major concern for the travel and tourism industry.
It's coming at a critical time. September, moving into October, is a combination of both leisure travel and business travel. We start to see the shift away from pure leisure over the summer, really moving into a very busy convention and meeting season. So you've got that combination of business and meeting travel on the one hand, but also still a lot of leisure travel. The weather's still nice through September and October. There's some other festivals and events happening. So it's a critical time for the industry. And for a destination like Toronto, it's so important to have that global air access that's so vital to our competitiveness. So this is very worrying for a lot of businesses in our sector.
And there's concern all around. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business is warning that a work stoppage at Air Canada that could have a devastating impact on small businesses and the Canadian economy. A statement from that group reads in part, nearly 120,000 travelers depend on Air Canada to reach their destination every day. Canada's hospitality and tourism sectors would lose out on the end of the critical summer season. Goes on to say, if Air Canada starts winding down flights on Sunday, a work stoppage would also cause delays in transporting critical cargo across the country. A single day of interrupted service could cause weeks of disruptions and inflict major damage to small firms who depend on Air Canada service to connect their goods, customers, and employees.
It's 5:45, 24 degrees, feeling more like 29 outside. This is Live at 5.
Coming up, another protest over a documentary about Russian soldiers that was supposed to be screened at TIFF today. We have reaction next.
The Toronto International Film Festival has pulled a documentary about the war in Ukraine, but a protest over the film still went ahead outside a downtown theater today.
Yeah, CP24's Kayla Williams joins us live with the latest on the controversy. People are really passionate about this, Kayla.
Yeah, exactly, Lena and Bakari. Instead of the film's premiere taking place at Scotiabank Theatre in downtown Toronto this afternoon, a demonstration was held outside of that same movie theatre instead by a few dozen demonstrators, primarily in the Ukrainian community, many of them calling out this film, saying that it is Russian propaganda. Now, the film in question is Russians at War. It was it's a first-person documentary done by Russian-Canadian filmmaker Anastasia Trofimova. Now, it has sparked a number of protests, as I noted, from Ukrainian officials as well as community groups. And TIFF initially had given this film the green light, and it was set to premiere at 2:30 this afternoon. However, they changed their decision, and they said they paused it over significant threats to festival operations and public safety. Now, we spoke to a number of demonstrators in downtown Toronto this afternoon at the demonstration, and here's what they had to say about this film.
We've been shocked that TIFF hasn't engaged with the community at all to discuss this. They claim that they're listening, but listening involves actually having a meeting or a conversation. We wrote to them a couple of weeks ago, back even in August. So I think we're hoping that TIFF will see what TV Ontario board saw, that this is the movie as it's being presented is not being presented honestly. If it was to be presented as a piece of propaganda, I think we would understand what it is. But I think it's being presented as an anti-war documentary, being done independently of the Russian state, which we just think stretches the limits of credibility in terms of what we know Russia does to journalists.
She has broken Ukrainian law by going to occupy territory in Ukraine without the government's permission. Of course, we're extremely disappointed with some of the funding that the movie has received from Canadian sources. Certainly with the Ukrainian community as big as it is in Canada.
The film Russians at War focuses on a Russian battalion over the course of 7 months that consisted of soldiers and medics on the front lines of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Now, according to the director, Trofimova, she says it was an attempt to focus and humanize Russian soldiers as a way to combat further anger and violence. And earlier today, we had a chance to speak with the film's producers, Cornelia Principe and Sally Blake, and here's what they had to say.
It's unprecedented, the access that she did get to them, and we see a progression in the soldiers' views over time. They become very disillusioned. A lot of them are not paid. Of course, there's a lot of loss of life. A lot of them question the war. A lot of them question their role in the war. And just to be clear, a film of this nature puts Anastasia at great risk of criminal prosecution in Russia.
So although, of course, we know that there was a number of people that did not want to see this film be premiered at TIFF, Lena and Bakari, just not too far away over in Windsor, they will be preparing for the Windsor International Film Festival, and they have confirmed today that Russians at War will premiere at WIFF. In fact, the film is also being nominated for a $25,000 WIFF prize in Canadian film. We'll send it back over to you.
All right, Kayla Williams, live in our newsroom tonight. Thank you, Kayla. Well, Russia is warning NATO against allowing Ukraine to use long-range missiles.
Vladimir Putin says that doing so would be viewed as NATO's direct participation in the war. This comes ahead of a meeting between U.S. President Biden and British Prime Minister Starmer. This is where the issue is expected to be discussed. Ukraine's been pushing Western nations for missiles to strike targets deep into Russia. When Prime Minister Trudeau was asked about the warning today.
Canada and others are unequivocal that Ukraine must win this war against Russia. And we will continue to be there to support Ukraine. And yes, Canada fully supports Ukraine using long-range weaponry to prevent and interdict Russia's continued ability to degrade Ukrainian civilian infrastructure and mostly to kill innocent civilians in their unjust war.
Well, back in May, Washington began allowing Ukraine to use American weaponry to strike inside Russia, but only for targets near the border being used to attack Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv.
Right now it's 5:53, 24 degrees. This is Live at 5.
Coming up, the jackpot for tonight's Lotto Max draw is the largest in Canadian history. What would you do with $75 million? We'll be right back. Well, former Raptor DeMar DeRozan, he's released a new memoir, and in it, he talks about mental health, something he's been really passionate about.
Okay, so the book is titled Above the Noise. DeRozan writes about growing up in poverty in California, losing friends to gang violence, and his struggles with depression. The 35-year-old was traded in a blockbuster deal in 2018, which sent him to the San Antonio Spurs for Kawhi Leonard.
For me, I always used to get lost in sports. You know, basketball was my imagination where I kind of just got lost in it. You know, whenever I had bad days or good days, I always knew I could pick up a ball, go to a park, play for hours and kind of get my mind off it. And it kind of translated over the years to me getting older, getting better, working towards it till you finally get to that point to where, you know, you need more than just sports to kind of work on yourself. And, you know, it wasn't until I was my mid-20s where, you know, I started to try to explore that option.
And DeRozan was selected 9th overall by the Raptors in 2009 and spent 9 seasons with the franchise.
So beloved in this city. Well, the jackpot for tonight's Lotto Max draw, that is $75 million, the largest in Canadian history.
We didn't even take up a pool at work.
I know, it's true. We missed that boat.
Well, OLG says that if no one wins, the jackpot is going to climb to $80 million for Tuesday's draw. The odds of winning are roughly 1 in 33 million.
People love those big jackpots. They love the 70, now the 80, but they always said, hey, why not give more prizes out? And we said, sure, why not? So that's where Max Millions comes in. Those are those additional $1 million prizes. Yeah. So you have a chance to win the big jackpot or those Max Million prizes.
Awesome.
And again, since February, we've had over 53 new millionaires in the province of Ontario.
People.
You have until 10:30 tonight. So
you mean we?
We, yeah, we still have a shot. You do too. To purchase a ticket, if you want a chance at the $75 million jackpot, that is so much money.
Well, not if you know how you're going to spend it.
Well, the city isn't done with summer festivals yet.
Nathan Phillips Square will be in full celebration mode tomorrow for Mexican Day Toronto. The free event, now in its 30th year, it runs from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. Organizers say that it's an opportunity to experience the best in Mexican culture.
And the Roncesvalles Polish Festival, that'll shut down Roncesvalles Avenue between Queen Street West and Dundas Street West tomorrow and Sunday. The festival celebrates the neighborhood's roots with food, music, culture, and arts.
And North America's largest Ukrainian festival is taking over Bloor West Village this weekend. Here's a live look of the festival. It's taking place over the weekend along Bloor Street between Jane and Glendon Wynn. Well, more than 900,000 visitors are anticipated at this year's Toronto Ukrainian Festival. The 3-day festival celebrates Ukrainian heritage and will feature a large parade along with live music and a lot of food.
I've covered this festival for work, and my advice is ask for the pierogies. They are delicious. Always such a good time. Okay. Well, you're watching Toronto's Breaking News, CP24.
Thank you for watching. CTV News at 6 is next.
Have a great weekend, everyone.